dynamic conversation.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Vito X Dino. This is episode 28. My name is Vito Delsante. My co-host is Dean Haspiel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dean Haspiel, and we have a guest again this time around. His name is Peter Rostovsky. Peter, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Peter is a painter, an
True,
academic, a
true,
cartoonist,
true.
and he's Russian.
Also true.
Don't hold that against
Uh, don't- no,
What?
I
What
think
was that?
it
Missed that one.
elevates him. Are you kidding me?
I mean,
Um,
interesting wrinkle.
and And he's done some comics, but is best known for Damnation Diaries, which was published by Uncivilized Books. Peter, talk and show. So it bounces over to you. Say something, Peter, so people can see it.
Yeah, Dean, okay. So,
No,
Dean,
but
thank you very much for
no. But
what?
wait, the
Wait,
way
show
this
your
works,
yeah.
What?
Vito,
Huh?
explain the tech.
Yeah,
As
explain to me.
so the
Sorry.
fun side of Zoom is
Yeah.
the camera will go or the recording will go to whoever's speaking. So you
Okay.
started talking as you put your book down. So
Yeah.
show your book again, but
Oh my God.
start talking as you do it.
All this technology. And let me guess, you want me to say something about my book as
Sure.
I'm talking. Okay. I am holding my book, and yes, so this is something that I'm very, very passionate about. It took me, I think, 5.5 years to make this book. I have many other jobs, and so this was, I've described it as a labor of love and suffering. And the short pitch, it's basically an auto fiction. It's a story of a sinner in hell who, after 300 years, decides to get therapy with hell's only therapist, Fred Greenberg. And the talking cure is successful up to a point, but there's upheaval in hell. There is a revolution by a mysterious faction. And I should also note that this protagonist, PKR, uh, is also accompanied in hell by his girlfriend, his mother, and his father, who is turned into a sandwich. So it's it's a political satire. I would say it's sort of a mix of Douglas Adams and Dante. It obviously has many helpful servings, psychoanalysis and Freud. So it is a bit, how should one say? I think it's like clinically rigorous to the point where my shrink actually read it, and she felt that it had it really understood the analyst's perspective. And yeah, I mean, it's been a great joy to make it, but also very, very arduous. And Dean was very helpful in seeing this project through because I made it in our collective studio all the way. I would say I think I was working on chapter two, so from chapter 2 to 5, I think you could kind
So
of relevant.
so I'm gonna take over for a second here, and
Go for
and
it.
and Vito, you have physically met Peter before, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
pictures of us hugging and kissing.
Oh, at
There's a
Baltimore.
picture of us,
Right.
indeed.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Uncropped us.
no, because what I'd like to talk about for our and our listeners in this podcast, and we can get into other topics later, but for now, I kind of want to talk about your origin of comics. Not necessarily the first
Sure.
comic book you read as a kid, but actually starting with an email that I got from a mutual friend of
Sure.
ours, more your friend than mine. I had met her at the tail end of one of the residencies I did at Yado. Kimi, what's her last?
Takesui.
Takasui, a
Yeah.
filmmaker, and
Mhm.
she reached out to me because you, I guess, were looking to meet a couple of cartoonists or something because you're working on chapter one and or
All
two of
true.
this what would become Damnation Diaries.
All true.
Can you talk a
100%.
little bit about that and like how you got into the world of comics? The actual world of comics.
Sure, Dean. Well, it all starts when I'm 5 years old. No.
Oh,
Um, so let's
and
let's
you're
rewind
wearing a
all the way to the
monocle. No, what's that?
Okay, so I mean, I do want to clarify one thing for our listening and viewing audience. So I was a comics nerd when I was a kid. So Dean correctly points out that I am from the former Soviet Union, and I came here when I was 10 years old, and I came to the Bronx. And I didn't speak very much English, but I somehow found Jimmy's comics. And so there I learned English. There I read the greats. We can rewind and go back to this. And so I was like a hardcore comics nerd, I would say all the way through maybe the end of high school, beginning of college. And actually, when I look at my drawings from college, it's very clear that what I really wanted to do was to like be an illustrator. You know what I mean? And at a certain point, it's sort of there's a break, where I drink the Kool-Aid of art history. I discover the let's say the promises of the avant-garde, and I sort of switch from being a comics nerd to being a theory nerd. And so that's like my fine art history. And so, I'm going to fast forward. So I live that life, and I think it's fair to say I'm still living it, right? I still teach in the fine arts department, fine arts departments. I still paint. I still, navigate in the fine art world. And so what happens is I go to McDowell in 2016, and I'm going there with a painting project. And in the meantime, I published this short story within a fine art publication, which is the Third Rail Quarterly. And that story is Fred Greenberg, Hell's Therapist. Now, I don't have much experience writing fiction, but I illustrated this story, they're just two illustrations using that skill set that basically lay dormant since I was a kid. And that skill set and those influences because they go back to people like Jim Starlin. They go back to that kind of, Bronze Age period of comics that both of us, maybe the three of us, really adore. And
I
so,
just to interrupt because I don't I fear you monologuing,
no,
and I
no,
appreciate it because I love it. But Bernie Wrightson, I see a lot.
correct.
In your when people get to see your work if they haven't already,
Yes.
I see a
I'm
little
gonna
Jim
hold that.
Starlin. I see Bernie Wrightson. I even see Rick Veitch, which I don't even know if
Yes.
he's an influence of yours. Um, and I see like Heavy Metal magazine,
Oh,
and
big time.
yeah, totally
Yes.
the Bronze Age of
So
comics.
the Bronze
Yeah, pull
Age.
that closer to the screen to the lens.
Someone is texting me. Yes. So that's one instance. I mean, there are many, many more page spreads of that nature. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it totally goes back
And
to,
that's another cool thing you did is that you
metal.
kind of color coded the chapters,
Correct, sir.
which is something we talked about at the studio. So like at some point, I think you were getting to this. Yeah, it's awesome. It's incredible. If people haven't seen this book, they must. I mean, and it also has been it's won awards,
I was going to say.
this book, you know,
Yes, I'm very grateful for the reception. Yeah, I mean, this is like very Bernie Wrightson
totally.
meets Francois Spuiten, who's the Belgian illustrator.
Yep.
Um, Yeah, so anyway, so I'll do both. So yes, it won awards. I'm very, very, very honored and grateful. Won the MoCA Award of Excellence in 2023. It was nominated for the Ringo Award in the Best Artist category and received, some really wonderful press from Publishers Weekly and art magazines like Art Forum, and so on. So yes, I'm incredibly humbled by the reception and by, really by the welcome from the comics community. But the way this happens is that, so, I show up at McDowell, I have this short story that's published in an art magazine. Kimi and I become good friends, we're still friends. And at the end of the residency, there's like an open studio. And what I notice is that a lot of people are looking at the comics work. They're looking like I printed this stuff up. I have comics drawings. I have my paintings there, but there's just like this, like magnetism to that
And
to
to
that.
add to that, to support what you're saying is, I feel like I've met so many closeted cartoonists or wannabe, or
100%.
they went on and became like CEOs or whatever, but they tell you, oh, you know what I really wanted to do? I wanted to draw comics. Like I just learned that Eminem wanted to be a cartoonist.
I didn't know
Yeah.
You know, yeah, and they showed his artwork, and he was clear that he wanted to draw comics
that.
because he was.
Sure.
what we start off with, we start copying the people we like, and he's definitely doing that kind of stuff. But and then those people are smarter because they go on to make real money and have lives.
Well,
Anyway,
I
so
mean, yes and no. So I'll fast track this. I meet Kimi. I get a lot of attention. Everyone keeps saying you should maybe consider doing this. And I say to Kimi, maybe I should consider doing this. And she says, I know a comics guy. And that comics guy is you, Dean. I lovingly call you the Pied Piper of comics, who reels people into a life of terrible, terrible financial decisions, but truly
oh,
devotional labor. And yeah, I mean, long story short is that my painting studio of many years got very expensive, and I left it on principle. And then the next day, you helped me wheel my Wacom tablet into the comic studio, and through the generous encouragement and support of many kind-hearted comic souls, I made this book.
so
Basically on
before,
spec.
oh yeah, before and
Yeah,
on spec, and
on
that's why
spec.
it reads as much as it reads as a commercial project, it reads very much like a passion project.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you did
100%,
both, which is a hard
100%.
thing
Yeah,
to swing. But yeah, we
100%.
before the pandemic, we were in a studio that had 12 art tables, but had 14 rotating cartoonists. I think at its height. But
Yeah.
when you entered the studio, can you talk briefly about some of the cartoonists that you met and what that was like being in a studio?
Sure. I mean,
And by the way, and also because you're an academic, you're a fine artist. I feel like you're constantly always weighing the balancing scale between comics and fine art and the fine art world and the gallery world versus the comic book shop. And
sure,
it's
sure,
we always have these fascinating talks because of what your background is.
sure. Well, Dean, the one thing I have to say that I do appreciate about you specifically is that you do navigate these many worlds fairly nimbly. So, and I think that that's something that I don't want to say I navigate, these strata nimbly, but I try to navigate many spheres,
I think
and I think that's
I was going to say, I
important.
think Dean has learned the fine art of falling into these different areas crotch first.
He,
So,
I,
and I don't mean that like
even though it is, yeah.
crassly, but like you put your balls on the line, literally.
Ball
And
to the wall.
yeah,
You,
and I think that like doing
it's an
films,
entrance.
doing plays, doing galleries, and maybe not even presenting in those galleries or presenting in those films or anything, but being Dean's very famously said to me, show up to your own party. So what that means, at least what I always thought it meant, was if you want people to recognize the work that you're doing, not necessarily recognize you for the work you've done or anything like that, you have to be part of your own marketing or your own success or your own networking. And I think maybe Peter, that's something that that skill set was something you didn't have prior to meeting up with Dean. Possibly, like I can't say that for sure.
I don't know. It's funny because well, the book is about therapy, and I'm sort of on my own therapeutic journey, and the one thing that I do think that I've developed because I'm an immigrant, in part, is that there is a very kind of adaptive type of attitude that I have in terms of trying to understand different cultural spheres and sort of understanding, the differences, but also points of alignment. And so I do think that even though, Dean and I, share this kind of attitude, but I think that for me, it's the more I sort of look at my origins, and look how I navigate this country, which is still in some respects kind of a foreign culture. I think that's an attitude that I developed from just really being an immigrant. But so Dean, so to go back to your question, what is it? So how do I compare these
Oh,
these worlds?
so
Oh, no, the studio,
well,
yeah.
I
What
think
did
the
it feel like?
overall
Yeah.
global
Yeah.
parlay we're going to have here is your teetering between worlds.
Transition.
And then
Sure, sure,
actually, and we've discussed this, that you've actually
sure.
found that they're almost one and the same in some weird way. I think you've started to arrive at that, which is
100.
interesting to
Yeah.
me because I don't know the fine art
Yeah.
world really. I mean, my
Yeah. Yeah.
girlfriend paints, but she doesn't.
Sure.
She's not academic. She teaches
Sure.
students, but you teach college courses, right?
Sure. Sure.
And
Sure.
um, you write academic papers.
True.
You actually have a pseudonym where you're a critic, you know.
True. Although he's a little
And
retired now. Yeah.
right, but you've done these
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
and yeah, you want to elevate the comics form, maybe not necessarily, in Hollywood, but on the walls of galleries and museums, like I think you staunchly believe that they belong with the great paintings or the great works because comics are great, and they're undeniable. Like
Sure.
you
Sure.
might
Sure.
have been, I don't know if you ever felt like you were shunning them or banishing them because you had to do the serious art, and then you realize
Me,
this is
no.
great.
No, me, no, absolutely not. I mean, I know they sort of get poo-pooed, as it were, by in certain circles, but it is true that I've had these conversations many times that there are many fine artists, painters, for instance, who are really really interested in comics, and they collect them, they read them voraciously, but because it is on some level. I'll just put it plainly, like it's a financial sacrifice. The comics are very, very time consuming. It's a notoriously um, financially challenging field, let's just say. And so when people do the calculus, they're just like, well, I'll take my chances selling sculpture or selling painting or something like that. And so even though they're influenced by comics and they are sort of, reading them on not even on the sly, but in their private lives, as it were, it's not the same degree of commitment. I'm just going to plunge into this field, and so, but just to go back, like 100%, you're right that there's a kind of equivalence that I found in these fields. When I joined the studio, it was George O'Connor, Mike Cavallaro was, a frequent guest, James Otis Smith, John Allen, Jason Little, Marguerite Debye, Jason Gungor, Owen Brosman, Frank, oh my God, I'm blanking on Frank's name.
Frank Reynoso,
Frank Reynoso, yeah.
Kari Randolph,
Yeah, Kari Randolph and
so many
Kevin
people.
Harris, exactly. Sarah Wood.
Sarah Woolley, yeah.
So it's just an amazing group.
What a crazy,
Anderson
what a
was the
crazy
Whitney
group that
Matheson too.
yes,
Whitney
yeah,
Matheson
and
was
Whitney,
part.
yeah.
Oh, and Swifty Lang, Jonathan Lang at one point was just there
Although I
writing.
miss Jonathan, completely. Yeah, I met him only afterwards.
Oh, okay. When he left, okay.
Yeah. So like I think that in my case, I can speak very openly that I have a long career as a painter, and that is a very solitary studio experience. I'm there with a podcast, with a book on tape, with music, and that's just you're in the bunker and you're just stewing in your own soup. And I haven't worked in a communal atmosphere really since I was in college. And so that was, one of the first things that was very notable and I would say kind of unnerving. But then the other thing that was very striking is that, people were incredibly generous in terms of giving each other feedback and sharing resources, uh, all kinds of, whether it's like apps or contacts with publishers, editors, and so forth. And I have to say, like, that's incredibly heartening. That happens in the art world to a certain extent, but I would say that it feels a bit more like, cards closer to your chest.
In the
Um,
art, in the fine art world, or not in the comics
I
world?
I mean I no in the fine art world. I mean again, like I don't want to generalize because I have many wonderful friends who've been exceedingly generous, and I think it is
Sure.
like a sharing community. But but I think there is like I think with comics there's a bit more a kind of communitarian culture I
I
felt.
have I have a question because I'm going to keep interrupting while we talk globally about the two worlds.
Yeah,
Do
sure.
Peter and Vito, because Vito also shared a studio in our ever expanding studio before you came, Peter. Do you guys miss the studio?
Oh God, yeah.
Well, I would say that yes, I miss the studio, although there's no way that I could do what I'm currently doing, which is painting surrounded by a bunch of people.
Right.
Right.
That's not because you're, I don't want to say ashamed, but or embarrassed, but like, do you know what I mean?
Uh,
Like, is there
it is,
something like behind that though?
it's what?
Is there
Sorry.
something behind that though, that like why you don't want to do paint? Like Greg Benton used to do watercolors in the studio with us, but like I think more often than not, he did take his work home. So I'm wondering if there's
Yeah.
something to that.
Well, just respond to Gregory Benton, and I love Greg, and I like to take jabs at him. And I saw him recently in Upper West Side with two amazing dogs. He would like leave like before now, and I'd be like, "Oh, you have to go do something? What's going on?" Because I'd work late into the night.
Yeah.
He was like, "Oh, I only draw with natural light, like the sunlight. Like I don't." And I
Wow.
was like, "But they make lamps and like,
Yeah, but some
but
people are
hey,
obsessed.
everybody has their own thing, right? Like."
Sure, sure. I mean, that's not like too far-fetched, but but Vito, to answer you, like a part of it is shame because painting is like it doesn't always happen according to plan. Like there's a lot of I mean, I know like working on paper, especially with comics, is also really frustrating, but painting is, it's still for me, I consider myself a very experienced, technically, capable painter, but there's still all kinds of shit that just goes awry. And that's just part of it. And so it's incredibly messy. It's quite toxic, potentially. So you I don't use many toxic materials, but I would not want to paint at home where I'm exposing, Mary or the cats to these materials. So part of it is just like again, like just a fight of because you're really crafting an object. It's not like you're making an image. And I love watercolor, but I'm like an oil painter. And so that's very fragrant. It can involve solvents that are off-gassing. It is, can be flammable. And many pigments are toxic, and I just don't want to, I would not want to like lace whatever, like have cadmium red lying around with a studio mate dipping into, ooh, what's this? So that's part of it. I mean, my studio mates probably know toxic materials, but so it's not like people are naive, but I still don't want to do that communally.
I have a question because
Yeah.
it's part of the studio portion. Um, bef you were already doing comics on your
Yeah.
own. You meet
Yes.
some cartoonists. You join the studio.
Yes.
Is there any highlights in terms of the benefits of the studio where you actually learned? Well, obviously you learned more about comics, but was there anything in particular that you learned more about comics by being in the studio? Like like
Sure.
like narrative structure, or
Sure,
did it
sure,
change the
sure.
way you thought about drawing or shortcuts or whatever?
Well, there are many things in the book. Like I have to say, so the book again. I'm going to go back to the book. I'm gonna be a professional. So here we have the book, and you see it's color coded, right? Each chapter develops the different stories of the characters, and that's a spoiler. It has fake ads. It has all kinds of digital uh, stuff in it. And it sort of develops, ooh, there's a sexy splash page. And it develops into, the final culmination, the denouement. And, like you could see in the book that it has this, that, change in terms of not only the color, but like there's a bit of a change in the attitude. So like really specifically, I can do boil it down, Dean. There was originally the book was meant to be black and white, and so my conception for this hell is that it's a monochrome hell, and this was totally how my thinking was proceeding. Then at a certain point, John Allen comes in and he basically has a kind of duotone book that's, it's monochrome, but it's just one color. And that was like a big aha moment. It's like, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be black and white. It could be far sexier chromatically. And so that is just like a very, very concrete moment. There are some panels where I think you and I were looking at it and you were like, no, like this could be a close-up of just the hands. We can basically break up this action and you can kind of, zoom in cinematographically. Or there was one sequence, where you sort of gave me some advice in terms of the panel flow and such. And then, there was another instance. I think this was for a totally different. This was for AOC, and I think there was a dance sequence, and I was sort of surrounded by. I think it was George, it was you, and someone else, and people were kind of giving me suggestions. It's like, oh, this could be just a silhouette of feet and stuff like that. So, like those are the moments that really stand out that people were very very, very open and just is like, well, you can do it like this or you can do it like that. And again, that's not something that I would frame it differently. Like that's sort of a bullpen, and I think that comics artists, because they're used to working together, they have that collaborative kind of attitude. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the fine art world, but that's like a tradition in comics, you know what I mean? And so, that stuff happens in fine art, but because people like Jen, for instance, or me, we work in isolation, that stuff happens, that feedback happens retroactively when you finally get someone in the studio for a studio visit and they say, "Oh, would you consider doing this?" So it doesn't really happen in real time in the way that it would in that kind of collaborative environment.
Do you
Yeah.
do you think that I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this. Was it easier to do? Well, no, let me go back. Did you have all these sequences in mind before you started getting feedback on it? And were you open to the feedback to the point where you're like, no, that's a much better like camera choice or something like that? Because I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like when you're doing a painting, you already have a set image in mind and
Sure.
you're set on it. There's very little change that will happen from the time you start to the time you end. Whereas with a comic, because you did it by yourself, but like because it is collaborative, usually you tend to play up the storytelling ability, the strengths of the artist that you're working with, if it's not yourself, or whatever. You might pick a different point of view or something, and I think that's where feedback comes in. And I'm
Sure.
wondering, like, how much of it was like, whether it be the AOC book or Damnation Diaries, how much of it was set in stone, and you kind of maybe it was frustrating to get the feedback and go in and you go, yeah, that's a better idea.
Yeah, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think it's, it's like it's not an either or answer. I think that there is much, like chapter one, I think when I joined the studio was basically done. Like that's just all me clean, And so like it wasn't color. And I wonder if chapter one and two, come to think of it, because it is already printed and I had already maybe even debuted it at Baltimore. So I think chapter two, I was probably I think what I was doing is I was coloring it in the studio. So it's really like chapter three, four, and five that I was working. And so, I think it's like it's kind of both, like I'm definitely like I have my ideas, am certainly grateful for the feedback, and if it works and I think it's a better idea, I'm gonna say yes. So I think it's kind of a combination, like I think that there's in many like, it was like already built, and then people came in and they kind of suggested tweaks, and I took the tweaks, but it wasn't like yeah, I mean, I think that that's how I work in general. It's like, I have I think it's very analogous to painting. Like I have an idea and I'm executing it. If someone is there to catch me at a certain point and they they weigh in, and I'll be like, okay, like if it's a good idea, then of course I'm gonna absorb it into, into the workflow and conception. But there weren't like, I have to say, just in terms of people's input, it wasn't like I can't say there were like radical overhauls. There was some radical overhaul when it was already in going into print. Like then like Tom and I sat down, and Tom is very supportive but also very candid. He's like, I don't like this font. Like to like change all the fonts, like I don't, the word balloons are like too mechanical looking, so it's like change the globally like all the balloons, you know what I mean? And then also like, this one page, this is what someone really hates to hear. It's like this one page needs to be two.
Mm.
Or like this should be a splash page, that kind of thing. So in that time, there was definitely like just an enormous amount of tweaking and going over it, back to chapter one. And also when it was finally, when I was adjusting the color, like that was a whole conversation and, like just kind of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So, but I'm used to working like that as a painter. Like there, sections that you might have to repaint, and it's just a really punishing thought where like, shit, I really have to go back and just, redo this whole section. And, very frequently in painting, like the way I work is that it's like almost there, but it doesn't have that last like oomph. You know what I mean? And that oomph comes in like highlights and glazes and stuff like that. And I would say the comics equivalent would be like, like maybe the placement of the word caption or the balloon or just a little bit of highlight. Or maybe it's like, you know what, like this would work with no background because it just like really highlights the action. So stuff like that. And Dean, I'm open to I recognize this, that the last thing I learned in comics, I think ultimately, was how evolved the art of lettering is. And
Mm.
so everything that I've done since Damnation Diaries has been way more sensitive to that stuff. And it's just like, like anything else. And I think again, this is comparing these different disciplines, like they all just go so deep. You can't just suddenly say like, I'm going to go into painting because it just looks easy or it's just about image. Like there's just this enormous depth to the discipline to get all the subtleties. The same thing with any form of writing, whether it's fiction writing or academic writing, where there, someone who's steeped in the discipline, there are like degrees of expertise that's quite manifest. And I think with comics, it's similar, you know what I mean? It's like I learned a lot, in that time in the studio. But like any discipline, it's like it's a lifelong process. And you'll see someone, with their first book, you'll see someone, it's kind of like a jazz, musician. Towards the end, they might be like totally minimal, but all of that wisdom is sort of like under the hood, you know what I mean? So I totally acknowledge that. Like it's, like any discipline, you really have to be immersed in it to get it. And I was very, very fortunate that, I ended up in that studio because it was like that kind of immersion, 100%.
I well, thank you. That was great, and I love being in the studio with you. And you're welcome to come to my studio anytime you want to do comics when
And
you're
you
not
can,
painting.
Dean, you can come to my studio
I
and
know.
And
smell,
inhale bad.
smell some Gansol with me.
No,
100%.
but
Fine.
it's funny because like I only I'll take notes from other
Yeah.
people if I'm showing my work and I'm whatever, and then ultimately I decide what I'll use and not use kind of thing. But yeah, in comics, because it is often a collaborative form, even if it's just you and an editor or you and the printer, but usually you're showing to other cartoons like this works, right? Is this not working? Whatever
Sure,
kind of a
sure.
thing. My girlfriend Jen works alone and
Yeah.
doesn't show me anything. I see
Yeah.
her art when she has a show.
Yeah.
And a few times she has shown me something, and I went, "Oh, that's really good." You know what though? It's the you know what though.
That's why she
It's
didn't
That
show
she's
you,
like,
too late.
probably.
I don't want to know.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's too
And
late.
she'll be like, but I'm not even done. And I'm like, I know. I mean, and I have a process too. I go from writing to layouts, to pencils, to inks, to
100%.
colors, the
Yeah.
lettering, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, it's so many steps, right? But it's harder to gauge what that is with a fine artist, because I think it's a lot of it's probably just so mental, to be honest, you know? And with Vito, when you said to Peter, you probably know what you're trying to paint when you start the painting.
Mhm.
I think a lot of artists don't know,
Yeah.
or they think they know, and then they immediately find out that that's not what they're doing, you know?
My
And
my
people
only
are picking
frame
this
of
up.
my
Go
only
ahead.
frame of context for that is I've seen I want to say process shots that Alex Ross has published where, he'll post what his original idea is,
Right.
like it's like a thumbnail sketch, and then it'll go through like one or two different iterations. Editor will pick one. And I think in the case it was Mark Chiarello, another fine artist, that then he went to work on, and then it was always just like a subtle shift from the final image, like maybe it was a light source shift, maybe it was just like a perspective, like instead of being front on, it was above, like it was always something subtle.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
which, yeah, I totally acknowledge that, like it's not as solidified from the first stage to the end, but I think it's more so, or maybe less so, I should say, in comics because of all the different voices that you have throughout the process.
So what I was going to get at was, and I'm still trying to like figure this relationship between
Mm.
fine art and, I won't even say commercial art. I'll just say comics, because a lot of us do independent comics, right?
Popular art. I like the term popular art.
Or okay, popular art.
Popular. Yeah.
But I started to realize that my version of painting in a studio alone is when I write a play
Sure.
or a screenplay, and I'm like,
Sure.
I'm just writing this on my own. I
Sure.
can't keep showing someone over and over and over again. What about this scene or this line? Like, it's
Sure.
crazy, you
Sure.
know? So Peter is right now in painting mode, because he's a
True.
show coming up in California.
Correct.
He's not doing the comics thing where, oh, does this sequence, layouts, the
Well,
process, the
there'll be a
steps.
comic attached to it, so
Oh, right, right. Well, all
there
right,
is a
and we'll get to
comic
that.
extension. Yeah.
But in a way, I started to realize, oh, that's when because I used to, like, I crave community. I crave being
Yeah.
around people and showing what I did today. And that's
Mm.
another thing. I often leave most days from my desk having made something or a part of something. Whereas I think when you're writing a big script or a novel or a painting, like,
Yeah.
you can't even determine, or what would you show, right?
Right.
So, Vito, I know that most of the writing you've done is in collaboration or in service of working with an artist.
Right.
But we have talked about you writing a novel, which I think you are,
Yeah.
and you probably, I think, written some other stuff like TV pilots and
I
screenplays and
wrote one
whatnot.
TV pilot. I wrote a couple of short stories that have been published for like Green Hornet anthology and stuff like that. Yeah.
And so do you feel like that there's a different mode you're in when you're doing that stuff?
Yeah, the yes and no. I'll put it that way because what I end up doing is I end up visualizing it anyway in my head. Like I end up and because the language of comics is one that I'm reasonably fluent in, I see things in panels or,
Mm.
but what's weird is that when I write a comic, I see things in film, like in shots. So it's hard to really, explain, I guess. But I think it just goes back to fluency with language and the shorthand that I've learned over the years.
Mm.
With the novel, my biggest hurdle is, am I writing enough? Does this have enough pages? Does it have enough words? Whatever, and I try to keep telling myself, just finish it and then go back and worry about that. And that's hard because the the mode that I'm usually in is comics, and like I don't finish the story until I finish the issue. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if it's like a 4 issue story, I can't get to issue 4 until I finish issue 1, and then
Right.
3. So
And
whereas,
but you also think structurally. I mean, that is
right,
structure. Like, you
right,
already have it embedded in you. But when you have something open and wide, and it's funny because, like, when I'm saying novel to Vito Delsante, I am, and I throw myself in the same cage. I'm thinking Pulp Fiction novel, like franchise, popular, whatever,
Hmm.
But if I talk to Peter about writing, I'll think literary. The word literary comes up, right? For me,
Because
because
I'm a cheap dime novel writer.
it's right. You're a
I
cheap
mean,
dime
but I
novel, right?
mean, without any kind of like
Right.
pretension or anything like that. I think
Yeah,
that's
Mickey Spillane,
yeah,
like absolutely. But and it's funny because I hopscotch between the two in my worlds, somehow, landing crotch first, as you put it before, Vito.
yeah.
Um, but it's funny because you and I, Vito, grew up, and as did Peter too. But you and I grew up knowing that comics were like kid stuff or shunned, or not taken seriously. Like when we were kids, comics were for kids. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And if you saw adults reading it, they must be stupid or something, right? Like,
So Peter, you said you came to the Bronx when you were 5, right?
No, I was 10.
10, I'm sorry.
It was
Um, so like you discovering comics was probably around the same time that Dean and I were, probably knee deep in comics at that point, but you were discovering it at around the same time. And like that age, what are kids' comics at that point? It's Chris Claremont X-Men, which is like
correct.
probably why Peter talked so much. Um,
100.
like in that and like Dostoevsky novels. I mean, what else is he going to be?
Well,
but I
I'm
love that
kidding.
that
I
but I mean I think me and Vito I think are in the world of we're firmly planted our legs in the comics world, warts and all, even though it became popular because the graphic novels sold, it turned into Hollywood blockbusters and everything else, right?
Right.
Whereas fine art has always remained fine art. Forget popular art, fine art. And then but it's taken more seriously, like, poetry, literary, painting, sculptures, and I never even for a second thought that I was in that world. And somehow I have navigated that world when I go to a residency with artists like a Peter, or you know,
well, what
but go ahead. But talk to me.
I promised myself I would not make this provocative in any way, but really what we're talking about is class, right? Because like the codes between fine art and comics are the same. Both you and I agree that we can take two, I do this in class, you and I do this together. We could take an image by Jackson Pollock, we could take an image by George Perez, we could see these are abstract paintings, all over abstraction, right? We see the codes, we see the formal, Klaus Janson, he lectured to my class. I'm very, honored for for that like wisdom. And the bulk of his lecture is understanding these formal principles in terms of how they're really continuous from fine art to comics. You can see the same thing in like Japanese prints, 19th century. You can see the, similar principles in all of these different fields. And I think where there's this kind of allergy and all of this tension and friction is around questions of class. America is a classist country. We can't get over it. We can't metabolize it. And so that's why we have that segregation. And I know this because I see this in my comics friends where they're like really allergic to you know how they perceive the fine arts. And I think that some of that is legitimate. It is a luxury goods trade, but it's also true that many, many fine artists really struggle financially, really massively. You know what I mean? So it's like there's a big part of it that's smoke and mirrors. And likewise, as I mentioned, there are many fine artists who get their nourishment from comics, and figures like Roy Lichtenstein who are like demonic because they were able to kind of thread one through the other. But I really think that what we're talking about in terms of that weird firewall is all the anxieties of class, and if you just get over it and you'd be like, well, this is like people, and like you don't have to hang out with the rich people. You don't have to hang out. You just hang out with like fellow creators. And
Right.
I think that's where you'll really, I mean, that's where I've been able to find common ground because I go around to Comic Cons and, like Annie Nesenti came here as a painter. Calvin Reed started writing reviews in Art in America, came like from the fine art sphere essentially. And so like people's histories and navigations are incredibly, incredibly complicated. And I think like once you acknowledge that, then all of those I guess like fears basically go away.
No, I totally agree. It's classist, and that's why I'm glad I was trying to prompt you to get to that because the way you express it is better than any way I could ever express it. But growing up, as I was trying to say with me and Vito, and maybe you too, Peter, I'm not sure, but if you're a sculptor, a poet, a painter, you might be told, oh, well, good luck making money at it, right? But you weren't told you're a child or an infant or, for, or at least I mean, why would you?
I know what
Because,
you're saying. I know what you're saying. Yeah, yeah,
but reading comics, just reading comics, forget making comics, just reading
yeah.
comics,
Sure,
you're
sure,
already like shunned and told you're an idiot or, go grow up or something, at least when I was younger. So it created that allergy, that classist feeling that I was banished of some sorts. As I went to in my public schools, I'm one of the better artists in the art class, And then when I get into music and art and art and design, I go to music and art, and then I'm surrounded by fine art again, for real, or at least the teachings and studying of it. And once again, I'm told, get a real job or learn how to do real art, kind of thing. And I'm not making that up. That's what I experience. So I guess I have a little, chip on my shoulder a little bit about it. And I guess the irony in some ways is that I have entered those rooms that I felt shunned by in some way.
yeah.
And like I'm able to have conversations at least about my experience, and also because I'm such a interested
Sure,
person, I'm a curious person, I can talk
sure,
to anybody about them, of course, and what they do. And I do think ultimately I am trying to level the playing field and say,
sure,
can't we all just stay, be together, kind of a thing.
sure.
um so but I also think that was one of the things that drew me to you. Once I got to meet you, I was like, oh, this guy is in that world a lot, you know
Well,
so
but can I just clarify something? So I'm in that world, but the thing is, like, the older I get, you're older than I am. Vito, I have no idea how old you are. You're 23, 24, I'm guessing, right?
Give or take.
Um, so no, but like the older I get, the more I actually really I sort of come to re-identify with being an immigrant. You know what I mean? Like,
mhm.
I came here, and this is a very, very difficult country to sort of I'm an American, in many, 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 many ways. But the one thing that is 100% accurate is that there is just a massive class divide in this country. You know what I mean? And I did not come from means. So I'm educationally privileged, you know, and so that may give me access to these spaces that you perceive as high, but I'm not economically privileged. You know what I mean? And
Oh, but it's
that
funny
is the
because you know what, I actually never would have accused you of being economically,
no,
I
no, no.
mean,
But
not
I think
accused, but I mean, like
no, 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 no.
claim that you
Well,
were. Oh no, I was just talking about the actual, like, the world of art, like
yes, but
the
this is
struggle
what
of
I want to.
art.
But
Yeah.
this is what I want to get to is that those two things are seen as aligned. You know what I mean? Like fine art suggests money.
Mhm.
Like you come from money, but it like doesn't mean that. It just basically means like you're a fan of any culture, you just part of the scene, you know what I mean? And I think that's like the myth that is like, well, you participate in the scene and therefore you're like, at this like cultural stratum, but it's just not true because like, the artists that I, you know, hang out with and know, like they live just as scrappy an existence as comics artists do.
Right.
Maybe, I definitely know some exceptions, but you see them in the comics world too.
Yeah.
So again, I think my awakening, if we want to thematize how these worlds like overlap or how they're different, like it's kind of the same. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I have to say, like all the shenanigans that pervade the art industry, where you're like, oh my God, this person got ripped off and this person was a sham and they walked in, and it's like, hello. We're like, seeing the diamond debacle in real time. And I'm just like, wow, it's just like it's just the same thing. And I'm sure, you probably hang out with, more fiction writers than I do. Probably the same thing in the fiction community.
I think in all cinema,
Yeah,
music, everything, right? Like,
yeah.
and
Like the
poets
same.
have the biggest leg up because they make nothing. So
Yeah.
they're not
So
even, yeah.
it's the
Um,
same. So that I just want to like, this is the utopian moment. Like, I think that we would be far, far better off in terms of like just disentangling those oppositions and understanding that like this is a community of creators, and there are many, 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 many overlaps. Not in terms of like not only the stuff that we consume, right? Because we can all agree that maybe we're watching the same shows and whatever else, but also I just like like the struggles are not that different. I know you just bought a new refrigerator, right? Like that's a decision that Mary and I would also, really struggle over, even though, we would go to a different let's say a different cultural venue for something,
yeah.
once in a while, that kind of
I
thing.
mean, yeah, man. It's like, I don't even want to get into the economics of stuff because it's just hard for everyone, you know.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, and I think one of the things that we all talk about, and we've been talking about Trojan horse companies and distribution and self-publishing. We don't have to get into a whole thing right now about self-publishing, but like, what is next, Peter? Like, you published a book with a publisher, a comic book. You then printed, I think, a 24 or 32 page comic to what's that one called? Can you show it to us?
Into the breach. Yes. So this is totally my first foray into self-publishing. And yeah, I mean, at the end of Damnation Diaries, I basically knew how to make a book. You know what I mean? And I was talking to a magazine publisher. So this is from Pandemics that appeared online. Dean and Whitney curated that. Uh, but yeah, I mean, at the end of that process, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to make a book. And so this is strips that Mary and I did together, so we collaborated on this. And it was definitely kind of like a watershed moment in the sense that all of a sudden, it's not just understanding the field through the way it's set up, and like again, to make an analogy, like, I just had this conversation today. You don't always need a gallery. Like an artist is a very, very empowered entity. And I think really the tools exist for us today, for self-publishing, for podcasts. We're literally taking the means of reproduction. And yeah, and so like I totally agree. I made this book, and I think what's next is working with publishers, but also publishing my own content, and maybe teaming up with artists to, exhibit our work.
And so that might be, and this is like the elephant in the room a little bit,
Yeah.
is the when I went to Paul Pope's gallery at
Yeah,
Philippe
fully.
Le Bon Gallery a couple of weeks ago in Chelsea. Um, there was a new edition of an artist book for him, and they kept saying the word monograph, and I thought, isn't a monograph like, isn't that just like a piece of art that's been printed and you sign it? And I didn't really understand the meaning, but it's a book, and it's an art book with, writing and whatever examples and this and that and everything. Um, and I thought, oh, do I need to do a like, so what I'm trying to figure out, Peter and Vito and some of our other friends, is how can we take the reins fully, or as best we can as individual creators and artists, and figure out how to, you said reproduction before, Peter, and I do wonder, is there something different between a monograph and a comic book, or a graphic novel and a monograph, or a print? And I know, for instance, like Philippe Le Bon, when he had Frank Miller, or maybe even Paul Pope,
Yeah.
they did a print where they did a beautiful print run of something, where they get signed, and I'm sure they sell for hundreds of dollars. I think he did something with Mike Mignola. I'm just using that gallery as an example of like a way to think about how to make more. And I don't think everything I'm ever going to do is going to be a luxury item, but how do we
What was
think
that?
smarter and
What was
better,
that Stephen Weissman book you got too from the gallery?
Oh, that's right here. Peter, I don't know if I showed this to you. It's really cool. I'll just briefly pull it out, and I think you'll want to get a copy of this. It's the gallery is ACD or
Something like
ACD
that.
Gallery
Yeah.
Okay.
in San Diego. And I saw online, I think actually Fantagraphics did an interview or something. It's called Peep.
Oh, wow.
Look how big that is. It's a
Amazing.
nice big book, and uh, it's just beautiful. And you know a lot of the cartoonists, and you know, and it's the kind of thing. Even though I'm curating and editing a comics page for the Red Hook Star Review. I'm working on a comics anthology about New York with Doug Latino. I've done pandemics. I did actor. I did all these other things. I'm always involved somehow with an anthology, right? But
Do
this
people
reminded me, it's like an art object. And I would love to do another anthology with all of us and our friends and whoever that might take 5 years because
Sure.
make it some kind of evergreen thing. It's just, I love these things, you
do
know?
people reach out to you to do those projects though, or to not compile them, but uh, kind of show run them in a sense?
I think so. I think some of them are generated by me.
Hmm.
Like, you know, if you want to call Activate an anthology, you
Right.
know, and then I had the idea of doing the Activate Primer, which IDW published, you know, and using it as a boomerang to like for the people who weren't reading our comics for free online, if they saw an anthology in the bookstore and they bought it because it had 16 really cool stories of characters you had never seen before, but then you read them and realized, oh, I can go online and read hundreds of free pages now of other stuff. That was the idea, was to create a boomerang effect, you know? And then you collect the stuff that's online and put it back out in print. You know, I remember being at Jim Hanley's Universe before it became JHU when you were working there, Vito. And the first issue of Brawl, I think we did a signing with
Mhm.
other, maybe some other comics as well. And that was that two-man anthology I did with Michel Fiffe,
Right.
where it was Billy Dogma and Panorama, and it was in black and white, right? And I remember like, oh, there was a good bunch of people, and I was signing the comics, and I would say to them, you know, you can read this for free online, and it's in color. But it didn't matter because there were two different ecosystems at the time, and I still think that those are separate. I think there are people like, and I include myself. I wait for the print. I'd rather read it in print. We're on our
So,
phones and laptops all day long. I don't know if I want to read another comic online,
so
you
there's
know?
got to be, I mean, I don't know that this is the underlying theme of this of the conversation we're having, but there's got to be a way to somehow combine the digital with the printed with the gallery. Like that's
That's
all
what,
thing.
so Peter and I have teased, and coming from Peter, like, you know, what kind of art comics are we doing while maintaining the fact that a lot of what we love to do is very pulpy, for lack of a
Mhm.
better term, very dime store novel, you know, like, you know, as academic as the background that Peter comes from, when you read his comics, they're fucking funny, man. Like they're dry, they're
Mhm.
intellectual, you know, they're horrific, but funny. I mean, you're laughing because
Oh,
of the
thanks.
horror, you know? I mean, and that's the point, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
the point.
and I love that, you know. And so there's a sweet spot, right, between popular fine art, academic, dime store, you know, like, and that
Disposable.
newsstand, that feeling of newsstand comics that might hang in a gallery wall,
Well,
you know.
you know, I just threw out the word disposable, and I think that's a word that, you know, we also have to include in there because generally speaking, comics as a medium is a disposable medium. It just so happened that people started saving them and they started getting worth money for some reason or other. Um, so I tell this story every now and again. Um, it was right after, so it was probably about 2012. I'm sorry, 2002. Sorry, that's 10 years difference. But Marvel put out the Heroes book, which
Yeah.
was post 9/11, had a firefighter on the cover. Uh, you know, and it was like a magazine size. It was, you know, but you're a bunch of 9/11 centric comics, but this one was, you know, more of a magazine than anything. And I remember this older couple coming into Jim Hanley's universe in Staten Island, and they were like, "Is this going to be worth anything someday?" And I looked at them with like this kind of like nonplussed look, like, "I hope not." Like, what are you doing? Like what? Who wants to make money off of a tragedy? Like
Yeah.
like even the money went to charity from what I understand. But like, you know, the idea is that going back again, like comics should be read and then given away, given to somebody else, which
But
plays.
I think that ship has sailed because I think once things became collectible and variant covers and everything else that happens, I think that was what's really cool the other night when we had this little toasting launch party for the debut of our comic section. It's a newspaper. It's
Right.
already, the minute you've opened it up, it's already ruined. It's already, you're smudged. The ink is smudging. It just by touching it and being near it, it's already, lost certain value, like because you've added your DNA to it, which I think is important, like to this experience. But there is like this, I am trying to figure out with you guys and a couple of our other friends, like again, how is it all those things,
Well, let me interject something because there's so just to kind of like pierce through this a little bit. The one lesson I think that we can learn from the art world, and I'll just put the taped banana, comedian as an example. Most people think that there are formal principles that make something disposable or collectible. And I think what this really proves is that that's not true because it's really just the creation of a culture of rarity. In other words, you can take any object and create that sense of elitism around it that basically put the velvet rope around it in some version. And so that I think is to me, again, like as someone who's navigated these worlds, I don't see formal distinctions. You know what I mean? Like you could see stuff in comics that's incredibly dumb, because it's not very sophisticated formally. And there's stuff that's very sophisticated that still navigates within that disposable culture. Or, like I grew up with the Woolworth spinner rack, like that was my introduction to comics. And I don't think that there was like lower in terms of just the data in that I was getting as a kid. You know what I mean? So, so to me, it's not the quality, it's the creation of that like economic stratum. And I think that really is what you're talking about, Dean. And I hate for it to sound like some version of like mass hypnosis, but I think the fine art world or even the crypto world increasingly tells us that that's what it is. You build a force field, you render something into a speakeasy, and people will start treating it like that. You know what I mean?
You're reminding me, and it's great what you're saying. You're reminding me of two quick examples. One was, um, oh, who's the artist that will do graffiti on the wall and everybody loves him and they don't know who he is
Banksy.
really?
Pepper Fairy.
Banksy.
Thanks.
Banksy.
Yeah,
And Banksy, like I think he had a piece of art and then they did the auction, it sold, and then it like self-destructed, right?
sure.
And then there's, I think Wu-Tang Clan did an album that only one guy bought, that
Martin
guy, that
Shkreli.
jackanapes, yeah, that
Yep.
jerk. So they made an album that only he could hear, supposedly,
Sure.
right? Now you're making me think, okay, my next Kickstarter should be, here's the digital version, for a certain amount of money, but I'm only going to print 10 copies for $1,000 each.
You should try it. Just give it a whirl.
It's crazy. It is what's
I
fucked up
know.
about
It
that
is.
is
Yes.
is
Yes.
I want as many people to read my comic as possible, but
Yes.
now we're strategizing.
Yes.
Like
But no, but this is what I'm talking about. I think that is a key difference because we're talking about generosity. That's why, as an artist, I believe in art that is generous. I believe in comics that are generous. I believe in visual forms that are generous. And I think, like that's very specific to comics because it is ultimately about bringing people in, not putting them outside and asking them, "Don't you want to be in right now?" You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that so when we're talking about the high and the low, these are some of the kind of psychological maneuvers. And so, yes, I mean, like if you're talking about price point, this is kind of, base economics, and it is gross, but it's true. It's sort of like the more exclusive you make something, the more people will desire it. You know,
There's I wouldn't say an initiative, but there's a thing on Kickstarter it's called Make 100, and all you do is you make 100 of the one thing that you're making. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So that's an option for you, Dean. I mean, you could
mm,
always just say, I'm
interesting.
just going to print 100 of these and that's it.
And then
Make
that's
a
it. And then
comic
and you don't have
on
to
a banana,
burden.
Dean. Make it
And what?
draw a comic on a banana, put it on the wall,
Absolutely.
record it slowly rotting in real time,
Right.
and then sell NFTs of every single shot of that banana as it goes into oblivion, as
Yep.
it browns
As it,
out
it browns
into,
out. It brown out. You call it brown
and
out.
then that'll be your historical piece that braids the two universes.
Oh my God. I
Or
or
the
I
three
also
universes, yeah.
I'll say this over the years, the amount of drawings I've done on bar napkins, and I mean like tissue paper,
Yeah.
basically, of Batman's or whatever. Paul Pope and John Cassaday used to call them mini Picassos because you could, if they knew who you were, the bartender, or if you were in a situation where you were like a name value person, you could literally draw something for 30 seconds, hand it over, and they would just get you whatever drink you want,
Yeah, that
kind of
was
thing.
Matt Groening used to do the same thing with Simpsons characters, like in Chinese food, I think is the thing. Just
Oh,
draw
I
for like
mean, and it comes from Picasso because Picasso, I think the story was he would go to a restaurant and he didn't have quote cash on him, but he had a checkbook. And he'd say, "Oh, can I just pay with the check?" And they say, "Sure." And he signed it, but they never cashed the check because his name signature alone was worth so much more,
right.
So anyway,
It's the
uh,
brand. It's the brand. But I want to say something that I think is really important, and which is during Mocha, I heard Laura Hopman speak in one of the panels. It was precisely this type of conversation. It was like comics and fine art. And she said something like this idea that, like anything could be art as long as you just create this like firewall of exclusivity, you put the velvet rope around it, and people will desire it, they'll pay all kinds of exorbitant prices. And like this idea has been dominant for a very long time, and that banana is, a clear example of how cynical it's become. But she actually mentioned, Winsor McCay. And her question or her thought is like that notion just needs to be dispensed with. That art is whatever you say it is. Because when you look at something like Winsor McCay or you look at certain pieces, her questions become like, is it, technically complex? Does it have profundity? Does it have all of these different, levels of depth? I mean, in a way, you can say like, does it have excellence? You know what I mean? And I would almost put it like, does it have generosity? Does it have hope? And I think that those are really, really important values. And I do think that that's something that, like, for me personally, I have to say, like, when I came back to comics, as a consumer, and then as a maker, I think what really, really uh, enchanted me ultimately was the fact that people weren't making this stuff cynically at all. Like they were giving it 120%. It wasn't like I'm going to play it cool. Here you go. I just did this thing. You know what I mean? Like it was just full on, just very, very earnest labor, for very little pay all the time, just because they love it. And other fields have that too. You know what I mean? And again, like that is a good rallying point, especially now, because I think as artists, we're kind of fucked. You know what I mean? And so we have to find some points to rally around because I do think it's like it's us against the AIs, it's us against or one can argue it's us, with some with the helpful use of sort of collaboration with that. But I think it's like, there's a lot of headwind. Um and and so I think that kind of like shared passion and love is a great, great thing to rally around.
mhm. No, I agree, and I love that you keep using the word generosity. Uh, that's how I feel. I I'm very communal, and I'm also very angry. I'm just upset all the time by
Well,
how
what makes
unfair things are. It
let
just
me
feels
turn
like,
let me turn the lens to you. What why are
yeah,
you
right.
angry? Explore that. Tell me
Why
more.
am I angry? I'm angry because there's a lot of, well, the world right now is very difficult, and
Yeah.
I kind of can't believe it. I feel it's so illogical, some of it, that I actually don't understand what's happening. And You know, listen, I love a complex villain, but some of these villains today don't feel complex. They feel like fucking idiots. Like there's nothing interesting by some of our current villains, real life villains, and I don't understand it. Like I get Doctor Doom, I get Magneto or Magneto, however you say it, like Lex Luthor. I get, and those are comic book villains, like, and I don't get some of these real life villains. It's freaking me out, man. Like, and to the point where I try not to read the news or look at the news because I don't know what I can do. I can comment on some of the stuff in my comics, and I do. And then the next project I'm working on, I playfully do my little kind of Judge Dredd version of our current science fiction, you know. but
Oh, oh, and I've mentioned mine, and I'm not subtle about any of it. Like,
Oh, I know. I appreciate that about you, Vito. Like that you go on, online every day and you share.
you know, it's a waste of time ultimately because the people that you're not trying to preach to the converted. Do you know what I mean? You're trying to preach to the people that have been subverted,
Right.
I guess. And the thing is, they don't want to be preached to because they've already made up their minds. And like my mom falls into that category, unfortunately. Where I think I told the story about last week about how she and I had a fight about Chick-fil-A, and
Hmm.
we had to like diffuse it and say, well, like because of, James, like we had to diffuse it. Like, no, people argue. This is how they argue. Blah blah blah. But and I think I even threw in, and we're Puerto Rican, so we do it loudly. So but there's my sister and I, my older sister, who we share the same mother. Um, she and I are more in tune and everything, and we're just like we just got to stay vigilant, like because some one of these, you know I'm sure there's some fairy tale like the boy who put his finger in the dike, to keep the dam from breaking and stuff. I'm
Hmm.
sure that at some point, the repeated calling out of performative Christianity and whatever this conservative movement is, I'm sure at some point I'm going to make a hole in the wall. I'm going to make a hole in the dam. And if
Hmm.
it's in my mom, all the better. So
Right, right. No, I appreciate it. And I actually remember you wanting to run not for mayor, but something
hmm.
in your town at one point.
I
So,
was contemplating state senator or state representative in this district. Um, I think if I were given the opportunity, I'd probably do school board or something like that. The problem is I find it ultimately, and this is the problem I think of being maybe not a liberal, but analytical and thinking person, is that ultimately it's all for nothing. You know what I
mm,
mean? Because like if the voices that you're rallying against are loud only by term of number, I can get loud, but I can't get that loud. Do you know what I mean? And
it's
unless
funny. You're making me think, Vito, and this has been secretly part of the conversation. Is like when you write or when we write and draw our comics, a publisher would say, "Who is this for?"
yeah,
Right? And so in your case, you might be wanting to change lives, let's say, for the better, right? And in my case, when I think about who it's for, I try to do it for me first, and then maybe some of my friends that they hope they would like it or whatever, and some peers. But I also feel like I'm trying to convince my own peers to like my stuff. Like I feel like my own audience, I'm trying to convince. Peter, where do you fall in that?
Well, so, but I wanted to ask Vito this because I think that this is like you asked. Well, I have a couple of questions that I hope would stump you. But Vito, so I think it's very noble that you would run for office. How would you square that with like your creative life?
that's
Because
the
that seems
thing I
like that,
can't figure out.
yeah.
That's the thing that prevents me from doing it because um, I don't want to. I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing. I'm not, super prolific or anything, but at the same time, my creativity comes from something, and I don't know that I could do that kind of work and not have it affect what I'm working on and still be, let's say, interesting to me. So I that's the point that I keep coming back to. Like, I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing.
Exactly. I think that's the thing. So, because I think that that's, something that we really face as artists. Like we have all of these, let's call them good intentions, you know what I mean? But it's ultimately always comes, it always butts up against our own desire. I don't even think it's a desire. I think it's kind of like a need to create in order to remain sane.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
That's something that I hear all the time. It's just like I need to do this because I'll start basically coming apart. You know what I mean? And
But I
that's a
also know
big,
many people who would say what we're doing is insane, or that they would never do that because why are you doing that? Um,
well,
and and I think it's more people who are more practical than I am, at least, you know, have
yeah, but
said that.
I think that, Dean, you have described comics as a calling, and I would definitely
Well, just to qualify, Howard Chaykin called it a calling. I then said it's a calling and a curse.
and a
So
curse.
it's
Okay.
so it's a
So
culling.
it's uh
Sorry, Peter.
curling, yeah. Um
It's a
so
curling,
no, it's no, but I,
a
I do
curling
think
of the cheese. No, sorry,
that's bad. Is to edit that out.
sorry.
So what I was going to say though, it's that like I think that that's something that is really important. That it's like we do this not because we choose to,
Hmm.
but really because we must.
Well,
And I
the thing is, like, a lot of people say, "Oh, you have a voice, use it." And it's like,
yeah,
how much of a voice can you have if you're writing a comic book? You know what I mean? Like, it's like you got to make sure that if you have a voice, everybody's reading the comic book, right? Everybody's seeing the movie, everybody's watching the show. That's having a voice. And like whenever people call out celebrities for not, stepping up against whatever the government's doing, or but then you see somebody like LeBron James in an interview calling Trump a clown, which is one of the greatest moments of television history ever. Like stuff like that. There was a thing that I shared on Facebook a couple of days ago of a I think Major League Soccer player, and he was talking about a shooting, and he's like, "You guys want to talk about the game? Go ahead, but we got to do something about guns." Basically, like not I'm paraphrasing greatly, but that's using your platform. So I don't know
yeah,
what my platform is, but I'm going to say it's comics, and I'm going to use my platform however I can.
And,
yeah.
To
just to speak to a little spoiler, a teaser. I'm writing these little Red Hook strips right now, just whatever one-offs. Just and it's actually been really interesting the constraint of 4 to 5 panels.
right.
What you can do. It's harder than you think.
I've done it.
But
I've done it.
the, the next Red Hook story I have outlined, and I haven't completely figured it out, is about guns and how much I hate them. And although I do love our science fiction guns in the movies, I love guns in movies. I just think I wish we could just get rid of them. But now, for the first time this year, 2025, I'm 58 years old. This is the first time I've thought about buying a gun.
I shot
Interesting.
one, and it's okay. It didn't tempt me, to go out and buy one. It didn't like give me any sense of power. I mean, I shot at a target, but
Hmm.
still, like, it's just like, all right, I know what I'm doing. I
Hmm.
can shoot, like,
Hmm.
Hmm.
didn't do anything for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Me and
I
Mike
don't
have
know what it
literally,
would do for me. I'd probably shoot myself in the foot or blow my head off or something. But
that's not a
whatever.
good idea. I
No,
used
I
to
know
do
it's not.
for me and Mike did archery briefly, and that
Hmm.
was close to projectile weapons. As although Mary Donnelly in the other room apparently is an excellent shot.
Mm.
So if you want someone to defend the bunker,
Oh.
just
I got I got news for you.
Tell her she has to cut off one breast so she can aim better.
she said no, she's a good shot with a gun.
as
Oh,
I
with a
say,
gun.
Oh, an arrow. Yeah, no. The real
I got
deal.
news for you. Michelle grew up in rural Pennsylvania all her life, basically. She's been shooting since she was like 5 years old. I'm not worried about my chances.
Yeah.
I might not be able to eat everything in the apocalypse, but I know I'm not going to get, hurt.
So before we shift, and I know we've been, going almost 90 minutes now. Before we shift a little bit to possible other topics, I just wanted to maybe try to wrap this up. Like, Peter, you're
Sure.
still doing comics. I know
I'm still
you
doing
have this
comics.
painting show, and you're going to
Yes.
do. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yes. So I'm doing a show at the Carolyn Glasso Bailey Foundation in Ojai, California. And so it's a series of paintings, and it will have a comic book integrated into the show. And so the idea is that it's not an either or for me, but I do both. I make paintings because that is not something I should abandon, and I make comics.
So you're
So
mirroring your experience at a residency when you showed art and comics, and people gravitated towards the comics, and I think maybe you're that might have been the what spawned or the origin of where you're going next.
I think that it's yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that I'm sort of going back to that moment, but I think the difference is that, back then these were totally different bodies of work. And now the comic extends the painting, and then the painting is integrated with the comic. And then, in the meantime, I have a whole bunch of fiction that I wrote that I can want to illustrate. And then I also, Damnation Diaries is something that's ever evolving. And so I have another chapter laid out. And then I have book two essentially plotted. And, I have to revise some things, but it's already kind of conceptualized. I have this anthology that I'm in. Dean and Doug, thank you. New York stories. So I'm
Vito
working on
too.
that. Oh, and Vito as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
I just got a page from it today as well.
Oh,
Oh,
I'd
nice,
love to see it.
I'll send it to you, Dean.
Cool.
nice, nice, nice.
Yeah, we haven't really officially announced it, so we'll just talk around it a little
Oh,
bit. But New
okay,
York Comics Anthology, and the details will come later. Yeah.
okay. So,
So
but yeah, no, the idea is that, I think that, I'll be frank. Uh, that was, I know that was an ongoing joke in the studio. Um, Frank's, uh,
Frank
Frank's
Minoso.
fictional talk show. Let me be frank. No, because I think that, the way my mind works is that it's like, it's either this or this. It's like, now I'm a comics artist. Now I'm a painter. No, 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 no. And it's very clear that the solution is far, far easier. I
Mm,
just do both. You know what I mean? And so
mm.
that's currently how I'm approaching it. And again, these are not mutually exclusive things. I write fiction, I write academic essays, I make comics, I make paintings. These are all the same world. They're filled with wonderful, wonderful people who migrate from one territory to another. You just have to find them and be like, oh, hey, I saw you in that world. I was like, oh, yeah, I was in that world. Now I'm in this world for a spell. And I think that that's I think that's a very healthy ecosystem, to use a term.
Also, I think that now the word multiverse is a household
Yeah,
term. We're all our own multiverses, basically. You know,
100%, 100%.
we're variations of ourselves at the same time. So Vito, did we have any like news topics or anything for this week about, to date
No,
ourselves?
no, I did want to ask Peter two things before we move
Okay.
on. Number one, since you're a teacher, you're more or less a mentor. Do you find, in terms of like your students and stuff, that it's easier to teach comics to painting or painting to comics? I know that's
Wow.
not a real question, but like
No, that's a real question. It's a good question. Well, I teach a painting and comics class, but again, my emphasis is to find the overlaps between the two. So how can comics, inspire painters? Like that's why having Klaus speak to that class is great because he's coming at it from a standpoint that really understands the overlaps, like the from a formal perspective. And so you really understand it's like, okay, like this is continuous from comics to painting to film, you know what I mean? Um so my thing is that I really try to kind of situate them. It's almost like one of those bridges, that you just put them at the same level and then just let the traffic go between the two sides. Um, So I'm totally, interested in creating that dialogue. And I mean, yeah, like there are key differences, but my point is to really acknowledge that there's many shared terms between these different disciplines. And I think that's also how, when I teach like critical theory, when I teach stuff that for people who've never ever read critical theory, I put it in a language and in a way where they're like, oh my God, this is actually really simple. It's just like the terminology is really, it's very specialized. Like I don't know these terms, but when I put it in, it's like, oh, like you can approach this from this perspective, or this is, what's your political experience of this? And it just you kind of see it, you see like all of that anxiety melt away. There's like, oh, that's actually totally comprehensible.
My second question is, I'm looking over your right shoulder at that bookshelf there with the graphic novels.
Yeah.
Pick out your favorite one. I want to know which one.
Oh, dude, it's not here. It's in the other
Oh,
room because I have another shelf. But
Go get it.
okay.
Go get it.
I was really hoping he would grab his own book right off the other
I'll
side.
grab his own book.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Damnation! Here it is. Like that shelf though. Like, have you been looking at it? Because I've been
I have. I
distracted
keep
by it.
wondering what that white book is. I think that's a Japanese.
Yeah, Tomie. And then there's
it's Junji Ito.
yeah, Junji.
Oh, Ito. Yeah.
Dude,
Ah,
this is the thing I would say that basically got me into comics.
I can see that.
The most
Camelot 3000 by
incredible. It's
Mike W.
Boland.
Barr and Brian
Poland,
Bowen.
yeah, I think it was his first gig in the US. And it's epic. And I collected these avidly. I bought obviously the reprint, which I don't think looks as good as the originals. But this
So
it
you
just
waited forever for those last few chapters.
it just has everything. I don't want, spoiler alert, but like these sequences, they're just mind-blowing. So yeah, so it was like right here for a long time, but we have major spillover. I mean, I have to say, as a close second, this is like a
Ah, look at that, Dean.
total overlap. And I had this conversation with a painter at a gallery where he kind of like took me to the corner. He's just like, but my favorite book is Selector Assassin. And then I had it at another like gallery dinner where I was sitting next to this lawyer. He's like, oh, yeah, I used to collect comics. There was this one book, Electro. And so, like, these are the ligaments, I'm saying? Like, this is the common term. So, when I talk to my painting students, I show them images from this. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, well, look at Sienkiewicz. Like, he's clearly looking at Gustav Klimt.
Yeah,
He's looking at, a whole lot of modern art, German expressionism. Like, there's a lot of amazing shit here. So, like, I think this is as close to my sense of, I mean, I don't work like this at all, but I think that position to me is the right position where you just don't see the separation. You just understand like these are all artists. We're all storytellers, right? Just working within our specific idioms. And I think our job is to kind of find the common terms.
I think that's beautiful. I agree with that. And we're talking about Bill Sienkiewicz and
Oh,
Frank Miller.
sorry. Yeah.
Frank Miller's Electro Assassin.
Electro Assassin, Camelot 3000. Please read them. Please buy them in whatever form. They're mind-blowing.
And I have some artwork in Electro Assassin.
You did some artwork on Electro Assassin.
I was Bill's assistant
Yes.
on, I
Yes.
think before he split New York for Connecticut, I think he
Yes.
was working on the first issue of that because he had just been working on New Mutants, which we did. I did some background art. And specifically, I remember I think there are some sequences where she's like childlike and it looks like cell paint flat
Oh,
art.
yeah. Did you do that?
I think he would just say, yeah, fill in this area, fill in that area, like kind of a thing.
Let me see if I can find it.
It must be early on. That's the comic that I remember watching him painting a page, and at some point he was looking around for something, and he looked over at his tea bag that he had taken out of a tea and rolled it up and had mostly dried up. And I saw him pick up the tea bag and start dabbing the page with this tea bag to get that color. That's what he found, what he needed. And it just showed me that this guy could use anything and make art
Sure.
out of it, you know?
Sure. Well, look at this.
Unbelievable.
So I found this I think on a Reddit thread when I was looking for images. He also predicts Trump because this political figure in the book looks a lot like
Well, you know
Trump.
who I think that might be? I
Gary
think
Hart.
that might be a version of Patrick McGowan from The Prisoner, but I don't recall.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that guy, and yeah, they totally predicted it. But that we had our examples back then of these people. We just had no idea it would become this stupid.
Right.
I mean, it
Yeah.
makes more sense in Electra Assassin than it does in real life right now. Trust me. Um,
That was
uh,
it. That was my only two questions for him.
Those are great questions, Vito. Look at this.
Thanks.
So, am I supposed to come up with a question that stumps you?
no,
No,
no, no,
no
just a conversational
conversation.
thing, or not. It's up
Okay,
to you.
I can ask this question. I want to ask this question. So, I think it's fair to say that many of us feel like we're creatures out of time, like we would have been better off at a different time. Is there a time that you feel you would have preferred to live in the comics universe? Like Dean, yeah, okay, so yeah, that's a quick on the buzzer.
Well, all right. 1960s.
Hmm.
Okay.
1960. I can't wait to see the James Gunn Superman movie because I think it's going to be a 1960s comic book we're going to go look at. And also, and I'm not talking about the politics of the time or the way women might be treated or people of color, but I do have an affection for the movie On the Waterfront. And that's sometime in the 50s, I believe, right?
Hmm.
So, but in terms of comics and culture, I think the 1960s, between the 60s and early 70s, you know? And yeah, I feel like my era actually is more of the 1980s. And then, and then the 90s got really interesting with independent comics more than ever. I mean, you had underground stuff going on for years.
Yeah.
But then, like, that slate of Fantagraphics comics between Love and Rockets, Bob Fingerman's Minimum Wage, Peter Baggs' Hate, Daniel Clow's Eight Ball, Jessica Abel's Art Babe, like those comics alone, Adrian Tominay's Optic Nerve from Drawn and Quarterly, like it was such a great era of like, oh, these are comic books that come out occasionally, maybe 3 to 4 times a year, and they were great, and I miss that time so much. Plus the superhero stuff I was eating up as well.
I don't know that I can choose. I mean, as much
But
as I like Golden Age comics, I don't know that I wanted to create them back then. You know what I mean? Like I could see maybe the 70s like doing like a Roy Thomas type of Invaders or All-Star Squadron in the 80s. I can see me being that kind of guy, but I'm as corny as it sounds, I'm perfectly happy creating comics now. Like I
it's
know it's a
great.
it's a rough
Yeah.
it's a rough industry to navigate,
Sure.
and it's a rough country to navigate and a rough world to navigate currently. But I think I don't think I'd be able to create the comics that I make now back in a different time. Like I don't think Stray exists
Yeah, 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 yeah.
in a different, like I know that I don't know that I've ever shared it on the show, but I've mentioned it before. Ron Hill, who runs JHU Comics with Nick Purpura, when I was first coming up with Stray, he goes, "You have to make your own Watchmen," and I took it literally at first, and I literally set Stray in New York City post that alien, destroying the city and stuff, and post, world peace basically, and that was the first original iteration of it. And then when I changed artist, I changed the entire narrative of it. But that again, like I don't know that I would be in 1989 doing that. I think it only works if I do it retroactively.
Yeah.
So I think I'd rather live in like be making comics today than in any other era.
That's a good answer. Yeah. 100%.
I mean, it's
Now
honest.
you're making me think, Vito, like, so at one point, and I'll say the 90s and 2000, like, you got Hellboy by Mike Mignola, and you had Sin City and Marv, and Martha Washington, Frank
Mr.
Miller and
X.
Dave Gibbons. You had all these characters, and Megaton Man, like, like a ton of characters that were like commenting on superheroes and or doing independent, superheroes. How many in 2025 you might get certain revenge comics or Michelle Fife just finished a 50 issue run on Copra. But like, are less superhero comics being, well, I don't think that less superhero comics are being made in the independent world, but that are sustaining like a 50 issue run. I
I
don't
mean,
think
there's
I'll ever
only,
have a 50 issue run of anything at this age.
I mean, there's only Savage Dragon, really.
Savage Dragon.
I mean,
But that came
Spawn
out
came,
years ago.
but yeah,
I'm talking about now in this our current era.
I don't know. I don't think so. Independently made, Invincible stopped being made. So yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, nothing seems to be emerging now that feels like it'll go 50 issues
Right.
or more, including myself,
But same.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean,
But
it's weird though. I think you made fun of me for having 50 issues of Stray plotted before. I could see myself doing them here and there, off and on, but I don't think it would be number one, a continuous run. And number two, I think I would truncate a lot of it into instead of like arcs into one issue or something like that.
Peter, we've talked about you doing like your version of a Doctor Strange story, and besides your protagonist in Damnation Diaries, can you imagine creating a character that you regularly visit and draw the exploits of?
Dean, this is a great question because I think that I think about this all the time. It's like, I think that there are artists who they have a little bit of a fuck it, I'm just gonna do what I want to do. And then if you're on board, great. And if you're not, that's not my business. And then there are artists who really ask themselves, well, like what would people really like? And they kind of, just throw it out there, and it's a little bit like venture capital. So
What a way to put it.
well, I mean, that's exactly what it is. Like, what people really need is iPhone that all, transforms into a walking stick. Uh, so, or like a billy club, you know what I mean? It's like a phone you can beat people with. So, that thought, and like to make, because I remember when I was watching like The Princess Bride, or even like Guardians of the Galaxy, like that first movie, I was just like, this is perfect. Like this is the perfect object of like love. Like everyone can just attach themselves to. I mean, I'm wrong. I'm sure some people watched Guardians of the Galaxy and been like, what the hell is this? Like, this is not for me. But for me, it was just like that piece of like, I'm gonna create the iPhone that just everyone everyone can plug into. And so I've definitely thought of like, well, what would that be like to just create that thing, whatever that thing is, you know what I mean? Like to try to like just to even imagine it. But secretly, I think this comes down to our political conversation, Vito. I think as artists, we're like ultimately very selfish.
Hmm.
Like we have a story that we want to tell. It's like, no, I got this story to tell, and you're gonna like it. Just give it time. You're gonna like it. You know what I mean?
I think
And
what people tend to forget sometimes is that not creators per se, but um, like readers, I think they forget sometimes that I am using Stray not to preach anything or to make you think something, to entertain you, and then hopefully you get to read it again, and then you go, "Oh, I see what he did." Like I don't write it. I write the stories that I want to read, which is, generally what we've all been taught to do. But I also write stories that I think speak to a greater collective consciousness, maybe. Maybe that's thinking you know, too much, or, or taking too much credit for something that I can't take credit for. But like I want to be able to speak to something like that where people will just like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like again, entertainment is always the first, goal, but after that, it's to hopefully resonate, which is why I usually tend, like we were talking about it last week, Dean, with Dan. The stories I tend to write are about redemption. I just find like I feel like you never run out of stories. Number
Yeah.
one, number two. Yeah, go ahead.
my book is 100%. about that. And I think, just to kind of piggyback, Dean and I, just in terms of our conversations, for a long time, but I think also, the all of us it's the Trojan horse model, because I think that, that entertainment is the thing that ultimately, initially hooks the reader, and that allows you to kind of deliver that payload of whatever kind of critical content you can. And if you don't have that entertainment to begin with, you're kind of screwed, in my opinion.
100%. I would say that 85% of my comics or a comic book I do is entertainment value, hopefully. And then there's 15%, maybe 10, possibly 5, where you're like what Vito said, if you read it a second time, you're like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
Trying to say something here, like, okay. Because I don't like clobbering people over the head with a message, and I feel like some of publishing has gone that way more recently,
Well,
and I'm not interested
you
in
got
that.
to speak to people in the language they understand. You can't just, just throw it out there and hope that, they all just pick up on it, just
Mm.
you know.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Anything else, guys? We're good.
I saw Sinners finally.
Oh,
Oh,
and
And I texted Dean, I think this morning or last night, I can't remember because time is, a flat circle. But I texted Dean, nobody told me Sinners was a musical.
oh, it's the best part of the film.
It really is.
I
Like,
mean, to me, like that, it just turns the tide once you realize that it's like this hybrid, and I mean, like that just blew my mind.
what I would, the thing that I read into it, I think a little too much at first when I started seeing the music set pieces was, oh, I see what they're doing. The vampires are trying to suck the blues out of the black man, and then I was like, oh, then they were black vampires. So I guess that argument falls apart. But, like, I just thought that like it was an interesting commentary. If
I
that,
like your idea better. I
yeah,
enjoyed the film, but yeah, when he wrote me, I'm looking at the text right now. Uh, he said, well, he started by saying, watch Sinners last night. No one said it was a musical. And I wrote spoilers as if, don't assume I saw it and I know anything about it. But he
I
goes,
know you
didn't you
saw
see
it.
it? Didn't you see it? I said, and I wrote, yes, the musical was the best part of the movie. Otherwise, it's basically an expensive blaxploitation movie.
Yeah.
and
That,
then and then you wrote me back and I wrote, but like the substance, we've had slash seen movies like this a ton of times that went under the radar in the horror genre. Now it's more intellectually accessible and Oscar worthy.
yeah. Yeah,
These
it
movies.
makes me think of the book that I'm currently doing with Steve Walker, Pay the Devil, which is I've described it. Peter, you would know it better as Kilroy is Here. This is the mini comic that I had last year, Baltimore.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I was asked to change the title by another publisher because they have an already established property with the same name. So we
Mhm.
changed it to Pay the Devil.
Mhm.
And the pitch is basically uh, Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers as a Vietnam vet, like this kind of. So I feel like that's kind of in the same vein almost as a Sinners, even though it doesn't have that kind of pedigree of the black exploitation.
Mhm.
It's maybe drive-in uh, grindhouse,
Mhm.
kind of thematically. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah,
Which
that's
goes back to your dime store novel way of
absolutely.
writing and thinking. Absolutely. It's funny because like I think what's happening is there's more and more quote horror movies or whatever the hybrids are today that are be emerging that I'm old enough to be like I've seen movies like that. I remember like the substance all I could think about was the movie Society, even
Mm,
though it had its own storyline, obviously what it was talking about, but like body horror, we've seen him, Cronenberg. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
so, but now there are people who have never seen that and go, "Oh my God, did you see that movie because of that?" And I was like, "Oh wow!" So I'm old enough now that it's new again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But now it's in a different guise. It's now getting Oscar nominations, stuff like that.
yeah,
Whereas in the '80s, that wouldn't even be. That was the cool section of the video store you would go to.
right.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Are you two watching? Okay, I have two questions for you. One, have you seen The Rehearsal, Nathan Fielder?
Yep.
You have. So I just finished season
No,
two.
I know what you're talking about, though.
That is,
Wow.
I think that is a marvel. I think
It
that
is a
to me
marvel.
is the
And
that's its own podcast episode.
it really is. And as marvelous as it is, I still want to punch him in the face.
No, no, I think I was talking with my friend Todd. I think he's one of the greatest artists working today. These are Todd's words, but
You're probably right.
I
You're
kind of
probably
agree
right.
with him. And so, but the other question, okay, so Vito, I don't want to, talk about it
No,
without
that's
you.
fine.
But then the other thing, are you watching The Sandman season two?
I haven't even finished season one, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I was in the middle of season one when the Neil Gaiman story broke.
Sure.
So it's hard for me. It's very weird because I've gone back and I've watched the episodes that I've
Sure.
watched already to try to get ready for season two.
Sure. Sure.
And I stopped, I swear to God, I stopped at the exact same spot where I
Sure.
stopped initially.
Sure.
And I can't make myself go forward. And I remember somebody talking about, I want to say cancel culture, but it was more like R. Kelly,
Yeah. Yeah.
specifically. And like they're like, no, it was Michael Jackson. He said, I can still listen to Michael Jackson. I can still enjoy Michael Jackson, but up until the point that he got accused of doing what he did, I stopped and I've never gone past that part in his catalog. And it's the same way with that show. It's remarkable. Like the episode where he goes to hell and challenges Lucifer for his helm is one of the most impressive visually stories I've ever seen done, especially from the fact that when you read the comic, it should not be translated into any kind of
Sure. Sure.
visual
Sure.
medium other
Yeah.
than comics. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I wish to God that I could get past the episode. I think it's the one after that, but I can't. I like literally stop there. And it's
Yeah.
like my brain has put up a wall.
Mhm. No,
And
I
it's
mean, I was gonna say that it's like it's a very, very different viewing experience, given those optics, let's say.
right.
But then the other thing I have to say that Mary and I talk about this all the time is just like you start watching and you're just like, wow, this is just like a really hot, mopey trust fund boyfriend. It's just and we keep joking. It's like I just want to just go with the scarecrow, the pumpkin head, or like they just seem like they're more fun. But yeah, like watching it in hindsight is yeah, it's kind of fucked up. I have to say.
I'm watching. What am I watching? Well, I just finished The Bear season 4,
Okay.
and it's funny because it's really great, but it also annoys me because of how precious it is.
Hmm.
But that's kind of why you watch it, and it feels like it's more like a modern music video with a lot of ambiance. I watch it for the ambiance, and there is some story there. And I have to remind myself that it's a story about grief and
Hmm.
pain and the walls that are put up. And I don't know if you guys are watching it, but it's great. And it also reminded me of like, oh, if Robert Altman was born today, or this is the kind of TV show he might be making, possibly.
Interesting.
I don't know. And then I finished and I can't believe that there's not a season 2 because they just announced that there wasn't going to be a TV show called The Residents, and
Hmm.
it's a murder in the White House, and during like a
Okay.
dinner party,
Yeah.
and they have to like keep everyone in the White House because everyone's a suspect type thing. It's almost like a cross between Knives Out and Murders in the Building.
Hmm.
Really well done. It's kind of brilliant.
Hmm.
And I've been watching this kind of dumb show that I can't help but like called Duster.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah, that looks good. But that's like a throwback to the
Yeah,
70s.
it's a throwback, but what's really weird about it is that every episode takes place in the 70s or the 60s. I think 60, 70, yeah, 70. And every episode, there's one scene that was written in 2025 because I hate the term woke, but it's a very woke scene. And you're like, no,
Hmm.
that's not how that scene would go, but okay, sure. And I feel like they keep inserting that because they will show gratuitous boobs or like protagonist wakes up out of bed and there's a woman that we never met just naked and that's the only time we see her, like. And that's how things used to be made, like. But now everybody has to have an arc, I guess, a story arc if they're going to be in the show.
Other
Anyway,
than Sinners, I watched an older movie a couple of days ago, like while I was in New York. I watched Better Off Dead, which
Oh, with John Cusack?
yeah, it's phenomenal.
Oh
Still, like
yeah.
still funny.
That's
Like
a good movie. Yeah, I remember that.
it's very funny. And then I picked up this little comic the other day
Ooh.
whoa,
by Mark Waid.
Mark Wade,
Ah.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
what's it called?
The New History of the DC Universe.
And who drew it?
Um, the artist is Todd Nauck and Jerry Ordway,
Oh man, I want to
and that's a
see
Chris
it.
Samnee cover that I have there.
Is it just like the covering the? Is it like a
Yeah,
infinite score style way of?
no, it's more like you might not remember this, but right around the time of Crisis on Infinite Earths, maybe right after, uh, George Perez and Marv Wolfman did a book called The History of the DC Universe, and there was like prestige format 2 issues, um, and it's basically like that. However, the fun part about this is in the back there's back matter, and so after you read the story, there's like an not an index, but kind of like a pseudo bibliography of like this person appeared in this issue, this whatever. It's very much, if you remember reading Avengers Forever by Kurt Busiek and Carlos Pacheco, they had the same kind of thing at the back of every issue. So that's the thing I think I'm more attuned to. I mean, other than Wade doing it, like I think like Wade's kind of grasp on the history of the DC universe and like his love of it, shows in the comic part, but then there's like the academic side of it, which I really enjoy.
Mm.
Right. Well, you said back matter, which I think brings us to flushing Peter down the toilet.
Bye bye. Here we go.
9:58 p.m. Um, well, what can I say? Thank you for having me on the show, both of you.
Oh, thank you, Peter, and you said lots of great stuff that I hope our listeners will pay attention to.
I
Thank
agree.
Yes. Well, thank you for the incredibly generous conversation. And we shall meet again in real life. Vito, are you any plans to come down to the majestically sweaty sweltering? Although Philly is not that different.
Oh,
Uh,
well, I'm not in Philly. I'm in Pittsburgh, but
oh,
it's still
Pittsburgh.
sweaty.
Sorry. PPP.
Still sweaty.
So I don't know if it's as humid as our lovely home. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I hope we see you soon here.
I'll be seen.
Oh, wait, and so Dean and I will be appearing together at Terrificon.
Oh, that's right. We're
Son,
gonna be at
August
Terrificon
8th.
in Connecticut,
Oh,
August 8th through the 10th, I think.
I think our buddy Kari Sanders is
yeah.
uh, moderating a panel with you, Dean.
Oh,
Both of you, like, or something to that effect.
I don't know. I'd love that, you know.
I believe she mentioned
Uh,
it when we were on their show, so I know that.
all right, I'll reach out to her. I would love to do a panel. I think Mitch put up the panels, and I said I would crash the Chaikin panel, you know, of course. And in fact, last year I crashed the Chaikin Marty Keen panel,
Yes.
and I would say the last half of it was me talking to them from the audience. So anyway,
A delight.
all right. Well,
Before
thanks,
we go,
guys.
Peter, where
Yeah.
can we find you online? Like, where can I send
Right.
people
Yes.
to get your books and
You can
everything?
find me online at Peter Rostovsky on Instagram. There's also a Peter Rostovsky on Facebook, and there's occasionally a Peter Rostovsky on Twitter, currently known as X, even though I don't really post that much there. But Instagram is usually in Threads, of course. Beware, there's another Peter Rostovsky who I know. And he seems like a great guy. I don't know him well, but I'm the Peter who posts a lot of art, and he's the guy who posts a lot about like crowdfunding and politics. So he's also Russian. He's also from St. Petersburg, but there is a distinction, and also a major age difference. But yeah, my book is on. I'm sorry, it is on uncivilizedbooks.com. Can find it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, other stores. Again, Damnation Diaries is the title. And yeah, give as they say, give it a read. You can follow me, and I'll be posting images of paintings soon. So for those of you interested in that side of my life, there'll be some teasers of that practice coming up.
Didn't we flush this guy already?
All right, I am being
I'm just kidding. All right,
The
everybody.
bowels
see you
from the
guys soon.
bowels.
All right,
Let's get
All
out of
right,
here.
guys.
see you
Yay,
later.
yay.
Thanks again.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, bye.
Have a good night.